when I had gone up into the fair bed of Circe, I besought her by her knees, and the goddess heard my speech, and uttering my voice, I spake to her winged words. Circe, fulfill for me the promise which thou madest me to send me on my homeward way. Now is my spirit eager to be gone, and the spirit of my company, that wear away my heart as they mourn around me, when haply thou art gone from us. So I spake, and the fair goddess answered me anon. Son of Laertes, of the seed of Zeus, Odysseus of many devices, tarry ye now no longer in my house against your will, but first must ye perform another journey, and reach the dwelling of Hades, and of dread Persephone to seek the spirit of the Theban Teiresias, the blind soothsayer, whose wits abide steadfast. To him Persephone hath given judgment, even in death, that he alone should have understanding, but the other souls sweep shadow-like around. Thus she spake, but as for me my heart was broken, and as I wept I sat upon the bed, and my soul had no more care to live and to see the sunlight. But when I had had my fill of weeping and grovelling, then at the last I answered and spake unto her, saying, And who, Circe, will guide us on this way? For no man ever set sail to hell in a black ship. This passage might seem pretty simple on its surface, and it is. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but it seems to reflect a lot of things I see in fantasy stories. And I don't have research on this. I didn't look into it. This is going completely off my own dome and speculations here. But every once in a while, you get a fantasy story where a character has gone through a couple phases. In a lot of modern stuff, particularly if you're talking about like a human entering into a fantasy world, there's a phase of discovery and orienting yourself to the world. Then it becomes a sort of story of survival. You're thrown into a phase where the evil is there preventing you from getting to your journey. There are physical endurances and physical threats to your safety. But then there's this pivot moment when it goes from a story of survival or an odyssey of survival into an odyssey for knowledge. At least the most memorable ones to me do. And I don't know why this film particularly is sticking out in my head, but the never-ending story. And I'm particularly the movie, though I do think the first half of the book also has this, because that book's kind of split into two. But there's this moment when the human boy meets the princess, and after all he's experienced, the princess basically doesn't quite break the fourth wall, but tells him your understanding of things isn't what you think it is. And you've made it this far, but there is more left to come, and it's going to test you in a different way. It's going to test your resilience of mind and spirit, not just your body. This passage today really made me feel that. It was a short one, but Circe basically saying, you can go home, but not yet. You must perform another journey. You have to go to Hades and seek this blind soothsayer, because he alone has understanding that you need to inherit. Understanding of what? We don't know. There will still be a physical struggle moving forward, but your brass ring, your golden fleece, whatever term you want to apply to it, is no longer something physical or a destination. It's a much more existential thing. It's a search for meaning. It's a search for knowledge. It's a search for wisdom, what have you. Now, I have to admit, I don't really remember the Hades episode of this story, so we're going into kind of a blind spot for me, which I'm excited for. But that means what I'm saying right now could be completely BS. That might not be what is going to happen at all. But the moment, I think, stands the truth of what I'm saying in terms of there being a point in larger stories of these characters, the journey itself transforming, not just the character transforming. And I got two more things to say about books. One is I'll put this to the test because I'm about to have a pretty long staycation, and I'm filling in a blind spot for myself and reading the entirety of Lord of the Rings for the first time. Thinking back on the movies, I don't know if there is that moment for Frodo throughout, but I'd be curious if there is. And I'm trying to think of Harry Potter. Not that these are the only two things that obviously exist in the world, but they're modern versions telling these archetypical fantasy structures. The other thing I want to mention, the other book I want to mention, has nothing to do with what I just talked about. Just one of these coincidences that I have brought up, I think, a handful of times this chapter, where once you start noticing something, now that we're reading the Odyssey, I'm seeing the Odyssey literally everywhere. Everything I'm reading feels like it has some sort of reference to it. Now, could that be biased? Yes, of course. Obviously, I'm reading the Odyssey. Am I seeking out similar types of mythological and legendary and folkloric fantasy stories because I'm in the mood and want to raise my awareness and knowledge of these tropes? Yeah, so I could potentially be putting things in my pathway and it just seeming like a coincidence. But I've been reading, and I started reading this a long time ago, before I started reading the Odyssey here, so this feels a bit more coincidental. Last year, and very slowly, I've been going through the collected fictions of Jorge Luis Borges, and he has a story called The Immortal. I don't want to ruin it, but the Odyssey and Homer ends up playing a really, really interesting and essential role to that story without giving anything away, though, the experience of reading Borges is that the ideas embedded within his stories are meant for discussion, and that's the joy of it, not that you're spoiling anything, but the idea partly is that maybe Homer himself is an immortal, and not in like a fantasy way. This is in a slightly different lane than, what we usually talk about. But if you were to make literal the idea that an author's works, particularly the Odyssey and the Iliad of Homer, standing the test of time, what if, that being the legacy of a person, what if that were that metaphor were reality, and that Homer himself was an immortal because of the immortal work that he had written? I mean, it's not exactly that, but I'm trying to dance around some of the more esoteric ideas in that story and all of Borges' work. But just the whole point being how weird and coincidental it was to run into that. And not just like, usually it's a reference to the Odyssey, not to Homer. So I found that fascinating. And the story right before it, which the title is eluding me, might have been The Cult of the Phoenix. I can't remember exactly. Had a story mentioning 1001 Nights. So I don't know. It's weird. These three works, Count of Monte Cristo, 1001 Nights, and the Odyssey, keep coming into my purview for some reason. Anyway, we're going to start to wrap up Book 10. We've only got 2 episodes to go, so join me here tomorrow for the penultimate. Until then, okay, goodbye. Odyssey is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. The show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Odyssey, written by Homer. Theme song by Neuroflow. You can support this show and other shows like it by going to patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.